Well, after getting some experience with a few different air filter setups on my 950 Adventure, thought it might be interesting to talk through a little bit of the latest one, which is the TripleClampMoto air filter setup. So I've had the stock airbox on this bike for a while, probably had it on there for 10,000 miles or so. Worked great, nice and quiet. Had a pre-filter on it with just a normal paper filter in it, and was happy with it. But when I went to travel on the bike, I really didn't want to have to deal with the maintenance that filter entailed on the trail. So I wanted to be able to get to the carburetors more easily. I was traveling by myself, middle of nowhere. If something breaks, you don't really want to be stuck out there forever, kind of trying to fix the bike, take it apart. So originally I actually got the Rottweiler filter just to simplify maintenance, really. I wasn't after performance gains. Of course, I did have to rejet. I went through that whole process, found that most of the jetting recommendations online are way richer than they need to be. Of course, I've got a 2-in-1 with a spark arrestor in it too, so maybe that's part of it. But I never found this bike to need quite as much air and fuel as everybody on the internet said. So that filter worked for a while. I know a lot of people online really like it. I ran mine with the Rottweiler pre-filter and was happy with it. It performed well. I never had issues with dirt getting past it or anything like that. But I did have problems with the actual filter material kind of balling up and melting almost. It's something that after talking to the guys at Rottweiler, they hadn't seen it before. It's kind of an oddball thing. I don't know if it's because I ride this bike in the woods so much. There's not a lot of airflow around the engine. It gets really hot in there. And I wonder if just the heat and, the constant abuse that this bike gets, if that just wasn't what made it different for me. So I would normally get only one, maybe two washes out of one of those $90 filter elements, and decided, hey, maybe it's time to try something else. So I saw that TripleClampMoto had come out with this new filter setup, which I'll get my glove box off of here real quick. You can see I've got some different stuff going on here. I ended up running this is the crappy fuel switch, and then just a USB charger in the glove box. So ended up buying this filter setup. I really liked the idea of it. I wanted something that I could clean more easily that didn't have an integrated cage like the ITG style filter. I wanted something that had a little bit more practical storage capability, right? If I wanted to carry a filter with me. You can't just buy a filter for these bikes on the shelf anywhere. Even if you have the stock airbox, these days a dealer isn't going to stock something like that. So I thought this was a really interesting thing to try. You can see the bike is externally pretty clean. It's dirty in here. So I have about 2,500 miles on this filter since I put it in here. Of course, I do have the pre-filter on it. It's pretty aggressive mileage. This was out at the KTM Ultimate Race 2019 qualifier. I competed in and won that event in 2018, so I went back out this year to do that as a sweep rider to help out the other riders, meet the competitors, that kind of thing, meet some old friends. So lots of riding in dust clouds, lots of dirt, lots of mileage off-road, really almost zero pavement mileage. So that'll give you an idea of, you see this thing looks pretty gross, which is not surprising. This bike flows a lot of air when you're running her hard. Right off the bat, you can see the filter is smaller than what was used on the Rottweiler style intake. That ITG filter ends up going up about here to here. Part of the problem that I had with that filter, and you can actually see on the bottom of the seat still, the filter would hit the bottom of the seat pan, and it just kind of pushed it down all the time. Not really a problem, just looks odd, gets goo everywhere that I still haven't cleaned up. So this filter does fit a little bit better. It also does offer a little bit more space for air to flow around the engine. Is that critical for cooling? You know, I'm not one of the people that's had constant cooling issues with my 950. I do have 2 fans on it, but it stays cool for me. Tend to keep momentum up enough that it's not really a problem. So yeah, maybe it's better. I still notice it heat soaking. If you run it hard up a hill, park at the top to talk to your buddies, it's going to be a little hard to start with all the heat that's ending up in and around the carburetors. So with that, I'll pull the filter off. It's real easy. And yeah, normally you don't take a filter off with all this dirt around it. I have cleaned it, but you can see it doesn't come off. It's all stuck on there because of filter oil that's hardened on there in the past. So nobody panic, it's okay. I try to keep everything as clean as I can, but at some point there's a practical limit to that. So we'll take the 2 thumb screws off. It's a tool-free filter change. Now I have not had this off yet. This is the first time I've taken it off since the rally. I didn't really look at it. I wanted to get an idea of what kind of durability it had. Now it's maybe dirtier than I would have hoped, but it was about the worst possible case conditions I could have run it in. So I'll take this off here, try to be real careful to not drop dust or dirt that might be attached to this in there. And first you can see the spider web of filter oil coming off that filter. Now they do come pre-oiled. The thumb screws come out like so. These are what hold the filter into the filter base plate. So I will stash those up here. And then we'll take a look at the filter. So it does look like it stayed sealed nicely. You can see a nice even pattern all the way around the base. There's no dirt on the inside of that filter. You can see I bought the silver version. There's a cage in there that does give the filter some structure. Okay, back with the flashlight. So the interesting thing that I notice is, and maybe you still can't see it, but right in this area right here, you can see that that part of the filter media is a different color. It looks like the oil has maybe been sucked out of the filter a little bit. I don't see that on the rear cylinder here. This was the rear side, I believe. Is that right? Yeah. So this is the rear. And you can also see that the trumpet, the intake trumpet for the rear carburetor was touching the filter there, pushing into it. You can see I've already trimmed this. I had to trim it to make me happy with what it was doing on the ITG style Rottweiler filter as well. So just the nature of the beast, there's just not much space in here. So I had trimmed that. It's still hitting. I'm going to try to trim these a little bit more. The other thing that you'll notice is looks like there's a little bit of shmoo on top of there. Not dirt or anything, but maybe like the filter got pulled down or pushed down into those trumpets. So one thing that I did do is I might try to cut these down, or I bought a second set. They're super cheap, still available from KTM. So I might cut a set down, make the bells a little bit smaller, and then try to shorten them a little bit so that they don't push up against the filter. You can see, you know, if that lip right here, that's what was touching the filter, that's right against the top of the filter. So there's not a whole lot of volume between the top of that filter or that bell and the inside of the filter. Now, really what that means is it may not use the whole filter efficiently. It may pull more air specifically through the area above those trumpets. So something to think of there. Now the pre-filter does have an elastic band on it. It's real nice. You want to make sure that this doesn't end up under that sealing face when you install it. So this one looks like it did just fine. We'll pull that off here. Now you're not supposed to oil the pre-filter. I did not oil the pre-filter. It did pick up some oil off of the filter that was underneath it. So pretty gooey, but it did its job. I did take the seat off a couple times at the Ultimate Race qualifier and just kind of blew some of the dust off of this thing. So it did work. It did stop a lot of the kind of sandy, finer stuff from getting at the filter. Let's hang that here for now. Clean my mirror later, I guess. So now you see the filter element, and I don't know what brand of oil this is on the filter. It's very, very blue. I'll have to research that before I clean it, unless I just take gasoline to it, I guess. Or some similar universal cleaning agent. It's pretty heavily oiled. You can see it's not really dirty on the sides. It's very dirty on the top. Maybe backing up my theory about, you know, more air being sucked through. It would have been right here and right here based on where the carbs are. So, yeah, something that just merits a little bit of modification on the trumpets, I think. So, I'll pull this thing off and replace it with the other filter. I did buy 2 of these when I bought this. So, and then get this one cleaned up, put the new one on, be ready to go. Nice and easy to change. Good thing is that cage is not integral to the filter. So actually, let's just see here. I gotta take it off anyway. May as well do it with the camera running. So if I start pulling this guy off, I'll be gentle because I'm not super familiar with how it goes yet. Not like on the 450, which I've done a million times now because they get dirty so fast. So, and these filters I can't just buy on Rocky Mountain ATV, not yet at least. So, try to pop the rubber grommets off the top so I can slide it backwards. I'll pull that off the back like so. Of course, I will wipe this down. I'll clean it off. Normally, I'm a little more careful because I got stuff sitting on a workbench or something. I didn't really think far enough ahead on this, apparently. So, dirty side of the filter, clean side of the filter. Overall, really happy with the filtration performance. Cage that comes with this thing, really, really nice. Fairly lightweight. It's all aluminum, anodized, clear anodized. Really nice piece of work. Really good even seal on the filter. So I'll set these down. We'll come back, take a look at the filter plate itself, look down inside the carbs, make sure there's no dirt in there, and put a new filter on. Okay, so I've got my hands somewhat cleaned up, got the filter set down in a place where it won't get my workbench totally covered in schmoo. One other thing about this kit is you can see there is no place for a crankcase breather for closed crank ventilation. To me, it doesn't matter a whole lot. I've not had the crankcase vent going back to the airbox for some time. The cool thing is Triple Clamp does provide this little foam filter element that you put on the end of your crankcase breather. So I've got that little guy. This is the factory tube. I do have the check valve down there that's kind of got some dirt on it. You want that to be up high just in case you go through some water. Occasionally, you know, the bike goes through pretty deep puddles, and chances are if it gets up to here, I'm risking getting it into the intake anyway. Not something I typically do on this bike anymore. Try to find a better way around. So cool little filter idea. Seems to keep some of the dirt out of the bottom end. This bike does have 90,000 miles on it, something like that now. So it's been running with no filter on this until I bought this setup. I just had it vented straight out over the chain there. And so if it can deal with that, this is obviously a better setup. Looking at the actual filter base plate here, it looks like no dust at all. I can see really nice kind of even pattern where the filter was clamped on, so I know that was sealing well. There is some schmoo out here, which looks like it's just filter oil with some dirt in it, so I'll wipe that down really nice. These, you can see there's some dust inside those the trumpets there. That is from a long time ago. You can see it's clean outside of that. The whole throat here, of course my hands are still oily. The whole throat here looks decent. There's maybe a little touch of really, really fine dust on there. But again, I'm using this in pretty rough conditions, and that filter was pretty dirty. So ideally, I don't let them get that bad. But this was one trip. 4 days of riding, 5 days of riding. So I didn't really look at it. Probably should have. So overall, really happy with it. I would have probably seen the same amount of dust with any of the other filters I've run in the past. Not surprised to see that. It's all very fine. There's no particles or anything in there that would actually cause any damage to your machine. So I'll take these trumpets off just to show how this goes on here. Just normal intake trumpets. There's no sealing ring on the inside, which is pretty typical. Prefer to stop all the dirt before it gets to the inside of the filter plate. Stop it on the outside. So this plate comes off like so. It has captive nuts on here for those thumb screws. So really nice design, nice and light, black anodized. You can see all the dust at the bottom. You can see where the sealing rings on the bottom have kept that dust out as well. So looks like those are doing a great job. I did give those a light coating of silicone grease, a non-reactive grease that won't degrade them or cause them to swell up before I put it on. Now it does look like they pushed out a little bit. That's something that I had an issue with on the Rottweiler setup too. I had a really early one. I think they've updated the design since then. If I take this off, you can see there is dust on it, quite a bit of it, but none of it made it past that seal. So overall, really happy with that. One other kind of aside about this, well, I guess two other asides. The first one being, these carburetors aren't really designed to be in a dirty environment. They're designed to be inside the airbox. So one of the things you have to check running an open air box is just make sure that your throttle linkage stays tight. I've not had any real issues with mine. I know there are fixes on Adventure Rider putting like ball ends, spherical joints on the end of that. And then you always want to check these fuel taps too, where they go into the carb bodies. Those O-rings are notoriously sensitive to failure. They tend to fail at a moment's notice and pour gas everywhere. They're kind of an oddball size too, so it's always something to keep an eye on. Yeah, otherwise, pretty good setup. The second thing I was going to say was, been really happy with customer service with Triple Clamp. One of the cool things about them is they're still developing stuff for these old bikes. So really, really cool to see that for those of us who are still riding around on 10, 15-year-old equipment and still love the old 950, 990 bikes. And part of their great customer service, they've come up with an improved design for these sealing rings and a couple other little pieces of this kit. So they actually have sent out a little, I guess, care package to anyone who's purchased this early run of air filters that has those new parts in it, free of charge. You don't have to pay for shipping or anything. So really cool to see that kind of customer service, see people really standing behind their product. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the TripleClampMoto air filter setup for the 950, 990. I'll throw a new air filter on here and be back out to riding. So really happy with it. The Rottweiler setup is great for 90% of the people out there. It works fine. For the really intense off-road hardcore stuff, I do kind of prefer this setup so far. Obviously it's not quite as big of a filter physically, but I think it probably has just as much filter surface area because it doesn't have that integrated kind of frame to it with panels of filtration. So, and this is just easier to carry a spare. It's more of a dirt bike style filter. It's easier to get an even oil on this style filter where you can kind of, dunk it, squeeze it out. Where the ITG filters, you can't do that. You're stuck with like kind of mushing the oil into the filter around the frame. So, yeah, so far so good. This is the first filter change and pretty happy with it. Okay, so I got a couple more things here. cleaned off filter cage a little bit. You see I started sticking the new filter on and then realized the camera wasn't recording. So this is what a new TripleClampMoto filter looks like. They do come pre-oiled like this, with those grommets in it. You can see this one was sitting on its side a little bit and some of the oil ran out of it. Again, I'm not quite sure what kind of filter oil this is, but it is some really gooey stuff compared to the stuff I'm used to using. The best way that I've found to do this, and I haven't done it a lot of times yet, is to kind of stick the cage in part way and wrap the thing around, get the little grommets on or close to on, stretch this thing. It's kind of awkward, but it works. And then get those grommets good and pushed down on the top of those aluminum posts. So, and then the thing kind of needs to be stretched from there even just to make sure that this thing sits square on the filter cage. So once that is done, which I think I've got it squared away now, you'll notice that, so there's a couple interesting things about this, right, that I forgot to mention earlier. One of them is that for anyone who's had one of the other aftermarket air filter setups, you'll know that the base plate is typically not symmetrical front to back, and this one's no exception. You can see it extends further forward than it does back. Again, that's to clear the seat where it comes up. The good thing is you don't have to worry about that with the filter cage because these holes are offset by the same amount. So the filter actually sits symmetrically on that filter cage. It's just the holes for the carburetors that are actually not centered in the plate. So really good that you don't have to worry about that. That's why only the rear trumpet actually touches the filter. The front's a little bit further away, and I'd already trimmed the other one. So I've already cleaned this off. Whatever this filter oil is, brake parts cleaner and gasoline both work beautifully cleaning it off. So good to go there. I'll set that upside down on the filter for now. So these are the new sealing rings. There's some closed cell, a really high density foam. Of course, my hands are all gooey, so they're not going to look pretty and white for very long. These are the old ones. You can see they're thinner. They're already compressed a little bit. And these are a higher density foam, but they don't seem to have the resilience that these white ones have. So we'll try them. We'll see. We'll see what they look like. They've got, I put some silicone on these too. They're white, so you can't see it, but they're a little sticky. So those sit on there like so. And then you throw the cage thing on here just like that. One of the other parts that came in the kit is new knobs. So the original knobs that came with the kit look like this, and they have a floating washer and a little Delrin piece of plastic on there. The idea behind the Delrin piece is that it holds this washer on, keeps it from falling off. That would be great, but in practice it doesn't quite work. So the washer can fall off. The washer just sits on top of the rubber grommet, which is actually, they sent extras of those too, which is awesome. So these go inside the filter, and then this gets pushed on top of the aluminum post in that cage by that washer. So the new parts are really nice because now instead of having a floating washer, you've just got, looks like it's machined into it maybe, or pressed on or something, but it doesn't move. So you can't lose it. Can't fall off, where this one, well, there you go. So much improved design there. Nice little improvements like that go a long way in making a product really nice to use. They also went to the trouble of sending an extra one of those little crankcase breather filters. So Cool to have that when that one gets gross and nasty or something happens to it. So all good there. And one last quick little thing. So I mentioned that I didn't really care for how little height there was between the filter, top of the filter and the top of that trumpet, which end up, it's like that, right? Not a whole lot of extra head height when the filter's actually stretched. I made my own modified trumpet, so now I've got quite a bit more space inside the filter. So yes, a shorter runner is going to theoretically raise your RPM for peak power. The bike makes enough power, I'm not that worried about it. It doesn't matter a whole lot to me. I'll ride it however it works, but I want the whole filter to be working the way that it should and not just focusing airflow through one spot. So the trade-off's worth it to me. All I did is I took, which you'd think with filter oil my fingers would be so sticky I couldn't drop anything, but that's obviously not the case. You can see I've trimmed these already. This was from the ITG filter that I had on before, the Rottweiler filter. So see the height difference? I took about a 1/2 inch out. I ended up being 13 millimeters. And all I did is I took the tallest one of these ribs, cut the top of it, and then cut flush on there. And the diameter actually ends up, that's where the taper starts in the trumpet. So the diameter ends up being the same. You still have your nice smooth runner, which I'll sand that down. The glue's still kind of poking out in there. Haven't finished it yet. And then kind of improved my cut here. So I'm going to update this one as well. You can see I hadn't quite gone whole hog on it, but have to make it look right. Who knows? We'll see. Haven't ridden with it yet, but seems like it can't hurt. The fix that the Super Enduro guys have been doing for a long time, because they have to use the sausage-shaped filter, is they usually just cut the bell off. I haven't seen any reports of that being bad, but just from an airflow perspective, it seems like the smoother you can get this transition, the better off you are. So we'll see what it looks like. Give it a try. Modify this one. It is just kind of super glued on there, so I need to do some durability testing to make sure that the vibration of the engine isn't going to break this thing off. But I'll keep an eye on it for a little while and make sure it survives. So that's that.